Hey everyone, Scott Wild here with Wild Inspire Media, and I would like to introduce you to a brand new podcast today that they are calling Lamb Talk with your host, Catherine, or as we know her in the United States, Kate Pfennig. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. It's great to be here.
It's funny to say welcome to the show because this is your show and this is a new podcast that you're going to be doing. And I thought we'd just reverse the roles on the very first show. Instead of you being the one doing the interviews and hosting the show, we're going to put you in the spotlight, and we're going to learn a little bit about you today. How's that sound?
It sounds like torture.
Well, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Now I know how my interviewees feel.
Exactly. So I'm sitting here in Bismarck, North Dakota, and you're sitting in New Zealand.
Auckland, New Zealand.
Auckland, New Zealand. Right. All the way around the world. In fact, it's 2:45 p.m. in the afternoon on Wednesday. And what time is it there in Auckland?
It's 9:45 on Thursday morning here.
So we are literally, around the world with this one. So, and we're talking over Skype, so that's you can tell the little difference here, and I think the audio quality is amazing. So, and this is how a lot of your interviews are going to happen, but I thought it would be appropriate to put you on the spotlight and put you in the hot seat today and kind of introduce the listeners as to why this show came about and all about you and why lamb is such an important role in the show and why the show is about lamb. I think the moniker for the show we came up with was all about lamb and a little about life.
A little bit about life.
Right on.
Yep.
So let's talk about the role that lamb has played in your life. Can you go back and tell us some of your earliest encounters with lamb?
Well, I suppose I'll set the scene. I was born and grew up in New Zealand, the second largest exporter of sheep products in the world, second only to Australia. And my father was in the Navy, so we principally lived between Wellington and Auckland, on the coast always, swimming, sailing, windsurfing, doing all the water sports. Mm-hmm. But my mother grew up on a farm between two smaller towns, Wairoa and Napier, on the family farm called Matahora.
Okay.
And in the 70s, my grandfather retired, and so I was never had the opportunity to actually visit him living on the farm, but we would go and visit him in Napier, and he would always take us up to the farm and tell us stories about my mother growing up and the mischief she got into and the mischief my aunties got into, and just he could tell stories like the old timers could, and it was phenomenal fun, and it was very special. And then we would always come back with a carload of meat and chickens and vegetables and everything else that was in season at that time. And Sunday dinners were a big feature, and we would always have a leg of lamb with fresh mint sauce. My auntie, she would take me across to her place, which was across the road from my grandparents, and we would pick the fresh mint from her garden, and then we would make the mint sauce and take it across to my grandparents. And it was just really warm family, exciting times, lots of stories and love and attention.
That sounds incredible.
Growing up in New Zealand is idyllic. When you're in your 20s and 30s, it's a little boring. And then when you have families, we all gravitate back. It's a wonderful place to raise children. But as young adults spreading their wings, figuring out where their place in the world is, it's a little boring, or it can appear to be, because it's not a happening place, but it is. It has a very special happening place for itself. And we mostly gravitate back in time, but you'll find New Zealanders all over the world.
Absolutely, and world-class beauty. Right? I mean, that you're known. I mean, that's the one thing that people always know. They shoot movies, and it's famous for movie locations. And I think the Lord of the Rings was shot in New Zealand, right?
Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, and Tintin was all done in New Zealand. The non-winter scenes in Narnia were all done in New Zealand. The winter scenes were done in Eastern Europe.
Sure.
But yeah, we call it God's Zone or Kodak country because everyone's always taking photographs, and around every corner is a different scene, a different look. The dairy cows look out over the ocean. There's hay bales right up to the sea edge. it's idyllic. It really is. Very, very productive soil. But because of that, it rains a lot.
Okay.
So you always have to remind yourself when you start getting housebound because of the wet weather. Oh, it's there's a reason it's wet, and it's because it's beautiful. If it didn't rain, it would look a lot more like Australia.
Sure. So, and people there don't tan, they rust, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
So yeah, one of the things, as I've visited with you and hearing about lamb, I go back to when you talked about, even your school lunch boxes and how lamb was such a huge part. I mean, New Zealand being the #2 exporter of lamb products in the world. I mean, even your school lunches. I mean, you don't have school lunch programs, is that correct?
No, we don't. No, every kid goes to school with a brown paper bag or a plastic lunchbox with sandwiches, cold sandwiches, sometimes salad, fruit, a biscuit here, cookie in the States,
yeah,
and that's your lunch. And you take a drink bottle and you drink water, and yeah, it's and so often our sandwiches would be cold lamb sandwiches from the roast the night before.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're actually quite edible.
Really? So, and then
yes.
they would provide you the mint jelly and everything with in the lunchbox and everything. So, I mean, that's just something that is not common. I mean, we grew up in North Dakota. We're kind of raised on beef, and we're kind of beef fed, and so. But I suppose it's just where you grow up, and that's the thing that I think you brought as a unique business even to North Dakota. We'll talk about your time in North Dakota as well too, but. Even I would imagine as a child, even the poem "Mary Had a Little Lamb" had a different meaning for you. Like you actually knew what it was like to have a little lamb.
Well, that's right. There were lots of little lambs. Even though I grew up in the city, the city children were very connected to the farms. Mm-hmm. A lot like North Dakota still, where you're only maybe 1 or 2 generations at the most away from the farm, as opposed to the big cities where you're more and more distance from the farm.
Yep.
It's getting more that way here now with the growing population and a big immigrant population. The connection back to the farms is not as strong. But when we were growing up, Mary had a little lamb and she ended up as lamb chops. Yeah. with the licking of the lips.
There you go. That's all it's saying. Now, you not only besides the meat products, but also I would imagine, you say your father was of Scottish descent. So, the use of lamb's wool in the kilts and things like that, and for warmth.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. Kilts are the Scottish traditional dress. Mm-hmm. And in Auckland, where we grew up, it's not cold enough to wear kilts as a school uniform. But in Christchurch in the South Island, it is. So the girls' school uniforms were all different tartans of kilts. And my father's family is from Christchurch, and so we would go and visit. And it would be a big treat to buy our Sunday best by going to the local school uniform store and buying a kilt.
Sure.
And then we would bring it back to Auckland and use it for Sunday best. And of course, nobody up in Auckland knew it was a school kilt. It was just a kilt and got a lot of attention. And again, just really warm, reassuring feelings walking to church on a cold Sunday morning. The warmth of the wool, keeping your legs warm. And it just strikes me now, looking back on it, how versatile this little animal is. It's so cute and cuddly and friendly, and yet it's a very vital part of many, many economies and cultures.
And speaking of that, okay, now you've grown up with lamb, and now you journey halfway around the world and end up in North Dakota,
yep.
where he definitely warm clothing is a mandatory for some of the months of the year.
Right.
Talk about your time that, in 1994, you settled in North Dakota. Let's talk a little bit about that time and how you grew your business.
Right. Well, in 1994, I went over to North Dakota with a girlfriend that knew my now husband, and we met, and that dirty 4-lettered word, love, it should be banned. And then there's that silly song that says, I'd rather live in his world than in mine without him. So hence I moved from a very beautiful green, lush country where shorts are worn 12 months of the year to the frozen tundra of North Dakota, where all they eat is beef and venison.
Sure. So what a culture change for you.
Chicken thrown in. So yeah, it was a huge cultural change, and you adjust, you make allowances, and you get used to things, and then you start going, okay, well now I've got to do something to make my own space. I'm not just an extension of my husband and of his family, and so the opportunity arose in early 2000s. About 2003, 2004, where we were getting a weed problem in our farm, and we didn't want to use herbicides because we had lucerne, alfalfa, chicory. We had broadleaf weed plants that we wanted, as well as the broadleaf weeds we didn't want.
Right.
And sheep will eat almost anything, and they'll eat what the beef don't want to eat. So we considered putting a flock of sheep on the farm, just a small one, just for our own use and for weed control. But with that come issues, because North Dakota is not a big sheep country, so you don't have a lot of shearers available. 16 ewes, which is all we were looking at, doesn't give you enough to bring in a shearer. So you'd have to take them to another farm, et cetera, expense, disease exposure. And we came across a breed called Katahdin, which was developed in the Katahdin Mountains in Maine.
Okay.
And it's a hair sheep, has no wool, puts on a thick coat of hair like a goat or a dog in the winter, and then in the spring it all falls out. And we settled on this breed because of that, but also because the meat was so beautiful and so consistent with its flavor, and it didn't matter what time of year I harvested, whether it be in the middle of winter when we're feeding hay and some screenings, or in the spring on the fresh, lush, fast new growth, or in the summer on the drying up grass, more mature end of the scale. The meat tasted the same. And now when we talk to people like Stuart from Perot Grill, the consistency of the flavor is what is most important to them, flavor and quality. And so this breed fell into that category perfectly.
Well, and so this is something where, I mean, when you first brought these sheep onto the land, I mean, obviously you knew the edible quality and you knew the quality there, but did you think that it was just kind of for your consumption, or did you have in mind that you were going to be raising these sheep now for other people to consume? I mean, as a business, or did you initially just bring them in to take care of the weed problem, and then all of a sudden you saw another opportunity, or did you kind of have that all in mind at the same time?
Well, no, it was really just for our own consumption. I was missing lamb and hadn't successfully found a good source of it on a consistent basis. And then I needed to take out a second mortgage on the farm to buy it. And then you didn't know if you'd like it or not. So it was really just for our own consumption. I was missing the lamb. We had 3 young sons now, or 2 young sons at that point. And it was just something I wanted to do. The weeds were a good excuse to get some sheep onto the farm. And the rest just came along. Our production outstripped our own consumption and any friends. And then I had a couple of selling disasters on the local market through the sale barns. And being the stubborn old girl that I am, I said, never again, I will find my own market. And so I set about selling directly to the customer and using a local processing plant in Steele, doing just state inspected.
Yep.
And got introduced to the likes of Stuart Tracy at Pro Grill by a good customer of mine, Mark, who owns Advantage Appliance. And he says, you should take this lamb, it's really good, and go down and see Stuart and see if he'll buy it on a consistent basis from you, and then you'll have a steady market. So in a future podcast, you'll hear that story.
Oh yeah, it's a great story too, and it's a great friendship that has developed over that. I mean, it was really fun to be a part of that. I think that's coming up. It'll be an episode 4, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. And so from there, it just accelerated. Stuart would take half the lamb, and I would be left with the other half to move, and you get creative. I went to Dan's supermarkets. I went to other top restaurants in other parts of the state, 10 North Main in Minot, Hotel Donaldson in Fargo, and went to farmers markets, developed an awesome website with nutritional information, all that sort of thing, and just built a business around having these lambs.
And the name of that business was Catherine's for Lambs. So that, and you're known in New Zealand as Catherine, but you're known in the United States as Kate, right?
Yes, the girlfriend I went over to the States with, and she introduced me to Kent, my husband, knew me as Kate at university. At university, there were 11 Catherines in our hall's residence. Only one of them got to keep her name. The rest of us got changed.
Oh, man.
And I ended up with Kate.
There you go. So you started this business, joined Pride of Dakota. You built this really this enterprise that became sort of its own niche. I mean, inside of North Dakota. I mean, there were of course there were sheep in North Dakota before, but not quite like this. I mean, and so I really saw what I've seen in your business is that you really carved out a niche, working with these restaurants and built up a niche. Well, now after all of this. Now, all of a sudden, you're moved back to New Zealand, right? I mean, for family reasons. And
that's correct. Yeah, the boat's steaming full steam ahead, and we're having a good time. The boys are enjoying school, enjoying the farm. Kent's got his business established. I've got mine established. And I went home in March of 2011 and had noticed over a number of years that my father had been getting worse and worse with Alzheimer's. And my mother wasn't taking on any help, and Dad was getting harder to manage, and Mum was doing everything for herself. And it became apparent that we really needed to spend some time here closer to Mum and Dad to help out a little bit more, or just be here, be closer, being that annoying eldest daughter. And so the decision in April 2011 was, we're going to put the brakes on this business, and we're going to relocate the family out to New Zealand for a few years and see how we go. And so I put the business on the market and sold it. And I sold all of my breeding stock, which was 350 ewes and 700 lambs. And we sold the business to a young couple in Grand Forks, and they own Billy's Soaps and Spa, and now they own Catherine's for Lamb. And they bought 192 of the breeding stock, and they are carrying on supplying all my regular customers and hopefully developing more of their own.
Excellent. And so on your way out of town, literally, I mean, like the week you are leaving, you and I have a discussion about how you can maintain contact with all of your existing customers and maybe even start to build a new audience. And thus is born Lamb Talk.
That's right. About 2 years ago, you and Pride of Dakota hooked up and started putting on some classes in social media. And being the inquisitive person I am, I signed up and poo-pooed it all for a couple of years, but kept going back for some reason. Must have been your charismatic nature, Scott.
Maybe it's because we serve cookies or something. I don't know.
Must have been, yeah. So if there's a free coffee and cookie, I'm there. And you would keep telling me, you should do a podcast. You should do a podcast. And I'm going, yeah, mate. Whatever. When have I got time? And then suddenly it's like, oh, I'm leaving, and I have all these awesome customers and friends and family in North Dakota, and I'm not going to be able to keep in touch with them like I used to.
Yep.
And I don't own Catherine's for Lamb anymore, so I can't be putting Facebook messages up to everybody saying what I'm doing because it's not mine.
Yeah.
And the realization struck me that, I don't want this to happen. I want to keep contact with everybody. I want to come back, and I want to do something else in North Dakota unique and exciting and everything when we get the chance to come back. And so I'm going to give Scott a call.
And thus is born Lamb Talk, which, according to our records that you and I have done, is the premier podcast about lambs in the world. So we have not found anything else out there yet. So
until we're told isn't.
Exactly. So we've already put about 4 episodes in the can, and so not only are you contacting and staying in touch with your customers, but you're also you're some of your friends and partners, and who are, I think our first interview coming up is going to be with Christy Rost, who is a celebrity TV chef based out of Denver or Texas or wherever she happens to be living that day. And then the next one is with Karen Ahrens, who is a healthcare consultant.
Yes,
talking about and talk about the little bit about life. We're talking there about family time and preparing the meals and some of the social and economic benefits and family bonding benefits of that. And then today you had a wonderful interview with Stuart Tracy from Perot Grill. And again, you can just hear the friendships develop. And so this is going to be a very, very interesting podcast, and it's going to, I think you're going to bring a lot to the table, and people are going to learn a lot about lamb and a little bit about life.
Yep, and they're not going to all be North Dakota interviews. I've got a number of interviews lined up in New Zealand, and we're going to visit New Zealand sheep farms. We're going to visit abattoirs, or what freezing works as they're called here, or processing units. We'll visit all sorts of the spectrum of lamb, including a minister, a rabbi, and a leader in the Muslim church, just to talk about the cultural differences and views on lamb and how they play their part in their religions and their cultures. We'll visit with clothing experts. There's some wonderful new clothing lines coming out using merino wool and a pest in New Zealand called an opossum, and that eats and destroys the forests. And they blend the two, the wool and the fur, together, and it is not prickly, and it is lightweight. It's machine washable. It's phenomenal clothing. So we're gonna cover the spectrum of what lamb can do in our lives.
Excellent. And if they want more information, they can already listen to the podcast. They can always go to lambshow.com. or facebook.com/lambshow or twitter.com/lambshow and engage with you and ask questions and request interviews or whatever that might be. And it's time to get social with lambs, right?
Definitely. If you've got a suggestion for me on who to interview, please let me know. That would be excellent. And it doesn't matter where in the world, as you can tell, Skype is everywhere. And it give me any excuse to travel somewhere too.
Hey, well, we have to do the live remote from New Zealand, and so we're already trying to purchase our plane tickets. So I need to get down there and do definitely a live remote with you. So
I think so. I think that's got to be done.
Outstanding. Well, Catherine, Kate, whatever the world wants to call you today.
Just don't call me late for a lamb dinner.
I call you wonderful. It's been so great talking to you. I really look forward to being involved in this product, and I think it's really going to be an exceptional show. And I wish you the best of luck. And it's just so wonderful to work with you on a week-to-week basis. And as all the people that we've interviewed that are your friends, I can see why you develop long-lasting relationships. It's because of your great personality. So here's to a good, successful run.
Thank you, Scott. We'll see you around the block.